This is the Big O Show. This is the Big O Show.
Welcome back, Ira Clay and Ira's Drapes, right here on Inside the Paint. We're going to close out the show. Make sure to drop your questions. You guys have been great so far today. And also, please make sure to hit that like button, or smash that like button. You guys have been outstanding today doing that. All right, so you brought this up in the first segment, Ira, that we think Dwayne Dedmon may be back as soon as tonight.
Yeah, I think he plays. I think he plays tonight. And again, that's a good segue into what we want to get into anyway. What of Omar Yurtseven? And today's a little part of it. Now that Dwayne's back, we know half of the prime power rotation, center rotation is back. Still waiting on Bam Adebayo. So the second part of the equation is, and everyone that asked Ira at Sun Sentinel has been asking me this, what happens when Bam comes back? What happens to Omer? So I want to get your thoughts first, Clay, and then I'll give you mine, because obviously you're not going to play three centers. Mm-hmm. Most likely you're not going to play two together. So how do you see it shaking out?
I think my issue is that I'm kind of longing for the Heat team that we saw the first couple of weeks of the season before stuff kind of went haywire. Mm-hmm. And, Spo's going to see more than I will behind the scenes, right? So I'm kind of setting all this up. If it were me, based on what I've seen and what I saw when this team was together, I'd go back to what we had the first couple of weeks, because I love the role that Dwayne Dedmon was playing. I also think he's a little bit more versatile defensively. And look, I do think that Omer has been a lot better, especially defending the rim, than I think we thought that. Yeah, and great. I mean, I remember like all the jokes about how slow his feet were when he first started playing. And look, I mean, those limitations are already going to be there. But I think to your point earlier, he's worked really hard to mitigate those as much as possible. And yet, especially when you're going to go against teams that can play you small, and you're going to want to have somebody who's a little bit more versatile defensively, or have more athletic big men, you want somebody who can kind of be in that. So long-winded again, I'm going with Dedmon, but I also think that you've seen so much with Omer that you can be really positive about what's coming in the future. And also what happens as the season goes on when some of these guys are going to need some rest.
Two factors there. I still think it's more of a future thought than a current thought. And I agree, Clay, that we talk about our playoff rotation versus regular season where you can find minutes. So yes, right. Any game that Dedmon or Bam misses going forward, I play Omer, no questions, and I feel comfortable about it. But you had something good going, and Dwayne Dedmon is a prototypic NBA backup big man who changes the game with his physicality, who can use all 6 fouls and not have to worry about his minutes, and who is playing very well in that role, like you said at the start of the season. Also, Dwayne is on a 1-year contract, so it makes sense. There's time, people. There's time for Omer to work it out. And here's the thing that I'm looking at with all of that. PJ Tucker right now is on a 2-year contract that is a second-year player option. He signed for less than the mid-level exception, $7 million flat both seasons roughly. You know he's going to want more money. He deserves more money. He's been terrific. He's leading the freaking NBA in three-point percentage right now, which is crazy, but he's doing that. So unless you can find a means through your mid-level exception or something else, you might lose PJ Tucker after a season, because even at 37 then, he's still productive. Markieff Morris is on a 1-year contract. We've barely seen him. You may wind up letting him go. The Heat do not have a single power forward for next season. Maybe that's when you get into what everyone's been asking now, playing Bam with Omar Yurtseven. But the difference is you will have an entire offseason to potentially craft a big, big lineup. And the one thing we've seen around the NBA this season, we always say to yourself, is there a litmus test? Has anyone tried that? Can that work? Well, look what the Cleveland Cavaliers are doing right now, playing 3 7-footers together in their starting lineup with Evan Mobley after they drafted him out of USC, Lauri Markkanen, and of course, and their center Jarrett Allen. And it's worked because you could play with 3 bigs if they could run the court. Now, Omar Yurtseven's no gazelle, but Bam Adebayo is. So you might make that work, but that changes everything. It'll clog the lane, which means Jimmy Butler can operate in his mid-post area. It means that Bam's not going to be on the elbow as much, so you have that going on also. So to me, that's part of the factor also. You'd have to change your game to play Bam and Omer. That's hard to do in mid-stride, even though Eric Spoelstra is great about coming with changes of paces anyway. So yes, Omer Yurtseven right now, if he were to continue to get minutes, play at this level, to me would deserve to be talked about as an all-rookie team player, first or second team. He's been that good. But there's a greater goal because you have 36-year-old PJ Tucker, 35-year-old Kyle Lowry. You're still living in the moment. And I think in the moment, Bam and Dedmon for this moment remains the better way to go. That doesn't mean there can't be a bright future. You already have Omer under contract for the minimum for next season, and then you'll get into his early bird rights. You're very well positioned salary-wise there.
Ryan is asking about PJ's contract. The second year is a player option.
Option, and that's a problem, yeah.
Yeah, because as you said, he's outplayed that contract at this point. And
they cannot use bird rights on him, and they can only give him a nominal raise. So the question is this, Clay. With that contract, you can come up with a 15% raise, and probably after this season, give him 2 years at about $20 million. Well, he's going to be 37. So you're telling a 37-year-old guy that you could still give him that kind of money. Maybe it does work. Maybe it loves it here. He loves it here. But the one thing I see about PJ, he won a championship last year in Milwaukee. He'll go anywhere. He loves the game, and he loves making teams better. And he even laughs about Heat culture sometimes to us. He goes, hey, if you have a good locker room, you could make it work. You don't need to have a name of Heat culture. You find the right place, you'll make it work. So I don't think he's wed here either. And again, I asked people out there in the chat board, and we'll pick this up again next week in our Slomin's Home Shield Inside the Paint show. What are the Heat going to do at power forward next year? I'm living in the moment, folks. I understand that. But I think it's interesting because I don't see it. We know KZ Okpala is not going to be the answer there. And who else is in this pipeline? Duncan Robinson is not a power forward. Jimmy Butler doesn't want to get banged around and have to play that kind of role. They don't have a first-round draft. They don't have, draft choices, so they can move in that direction. Maybe another free agent in the PJ Tucker realm. But still, that's a question. But I'm living in the moment. Let's get through this year. It's pandemic and everything. I'm living year to year, month to month, week to week, day to day.
Upcoming schedule, Ira, this back-to-back against Atlanta, and then you got Philadelphia coming in after that. How do you see this playing out, and how important is it for Miami to kind of make a statement in these games?
Well, I think you're right. I think when you play the same team consecutive games, one team goes to school and the other, one team relaxes and exhales a lot. So you're probably looking at a split. It'll be really interesting. They have a home-and-home back-to-back, Atlanta on Friday, and then Philly on Saturday. We always ask Eric Spoelstra these questions. Will you rest certain players? We just mentioned the older roster, PJ Tucker, 36, Kyle Lowry, 35. And Spo always tells us, nope, I feel comfortable. We're going to play this thing out. I really am curious how it plays out. I do think if they win both of these games against Atlanta, here in Atlanta on Wednesday, Friday at home against Atlanta, they might be more likely to rest some players and to have some common sense with it also. So I think today very much could be a swing game in this 3-game and 4-night sets they have coming up.
So Chris asks this, or Clark, excuse me, if it does get to the buyout season, and you've got a choice here. He mentions 2 players, Kevin Love and John Wall. And I don't know if it feels like Love has kind of found a spot there, though, and Cleveland's playing so well. But I guess the overarching question is, which one would you prefer, not just as a player, but also what do you think this team would need between those two as kind of the backup point guard or the big?
Well, I think they're both ungettable because, like you said, Love is doing enough that there doesn't have to be a buyout, and Kevin really seems to enjoy playing with that team. John Wall has $90 million left on his deal. There's no reason when you have a buyout player not to wait to the final year of his contract. But yeah, I'd feel comfortable a little bit more with a John Wall unless, and I love how our shows go full circle, unless I know about Victor Oladipo. And I've got to tell you this, and I wrote this in my Sunday column, The Sun Sentinel, and I've written this all along. If the Heat entire roster is healthy, I could take February 10th off. They don't need to make a trade. They've got too much. We haven't even gotten into the depth of the show this season. But again, sort of to wrap a bow and put a bow in this whole thing, I'm going to go back to Duncan Robinson in the starting lineup because I think they get there. You can disagree and sub out Max Strus if you want. But Clay, if we're talking about their standard healthy starting lineup of Bam and PJ and Duncan and Kyle and Jimmy, okay, I'm giving you those 5. Give me, and I know I'm putting you on the spot here and people hate this, give me your next 3 off the bench if you're only going 8 deep. So again, I've given you Bam and Tucker and Duncan. I know you can disagree on that. And Lowry and Butler. Who are your next 3 off the bench?
Well, I mean, the three that immediately jump out are Hero, Strus, and Dedmon.
Okay. All right. So let's stay there. We're going to go back and
Right.
forth here on that. So you're giving me Hero, Strus, and Dedmon, and I'm fine with that. And what's interesting there is we push Markieff Morris aside because we haven't seen him. He was the original guy in there.
Mm-hmm.
I love Caleb Martin and what he does. I think he's a 5-tool player. I think he defends. He hits a three-pointer. We know he can dunk. You know, he can move the ball. He does so many things there also. You have him out of your rotation. You haven't mentioned Gabe Vincent, who has emerged as an NBA rotation level player. That's 3 more. I'm 11 deep right now. You haven't mentioned Turk Nowitzki. You haven't mentioned Omar Yurtseven yet, okay? So now that's 4 more to your 8. So I'm 12 deep right now. And we haven't mentioned Victor Oladipo. And I'm 13 deep. So the point of the Heat, well, it used to be, yes, we've got to make a buyout move. We've got to get someone else. If they get this thing whole and a coronavirus goes away, that we don't have another, Omicron kind of thing like this later in the season, then I think instead of having all these fantasy deals about a John Wall or a Kevin Love or making a trade or a Bradley Beal or a Damian Lillard or a CJ McCollum, I want to get my house in order. I don't want my house divided. I want it to stand, and I want to get all these guys together. But it's really interesting, Clay, because there are some people out there, and they're probably showing up on the message board, and I'm sorry we're getting to the end of the show, who is saying, no, you've got to start Max Strus. He's a more complete player. And yet if you do that and we go through our 3 reserves, I'm not sure you'd have Duncan Robinson in that top 8 because you might say to yourself, you know what, Ira? I need a defensive presence off the bench. And Caleb Martin can be that player, and he can make some threes also. So you're shuffling other players. So I think the Heat's roster is set up perfectly if we have any knowledge or closure on Victor Oladipo. And then I want to just play this out as is. You don't need to have to make a reach. Yes, 2 years ago, Jay Crowder and Andre Iguodala were exactly what the doctor ordered. Last season, Victor Oladipo might have been, and honestly, Trevor Ariza and Dwayne Dedmon were needed around that time of year just because the Heat didn't have a power forward at all. But this is a different situation. This team is very well personnel suited. I don't think they have to reach for anything, and that goes back to your question earlier. What are they going to do with KZ Okpala? Honestly, they could do nothing. You could have the Okpala, and you could have the Haslam spots, and they still have 14 names to choose from.
Yeah, and look, Ira's somebody, and everybody knows you, Ira, who follows the Heat. Like, you're not going to come in here with roses and sunshine and be overly optimistic and stuff. And I'm not trying to sit here and say that.
And let me interrupt you for a second, because look, if you look at our logos on the bottom, you have Happy Clay over there on the right, and you have like miserable Ira on the left there. Like, doesn't think I smile. Must go through like all my profile pictures going, nope. Okay, I'll just go with that one. So yes, I tend to take a more middle type of approach where I understand that you love your Heat and you got your jersey right behind your head over there, and I get all of that. But in this case, Clay, I'm going more toward Happy Clay at the bottom corner of your screen because, I think they have a lot of good stuff going for them.
I'm dying. You guys, by the way, great comments, great questions. And Clark says that I usually love the February trade deadline, but right now, like, I've never been so stumped. And so it's like, not trying to put like a totally rosy picture on this thing. We've seen how things can go sideways, man. Like when Jimmy Butler went down the other night, it felt like, oh man, if he's done, then this season is done. And you're really relying on older players, right? And that's kind of what we've said from the beginning. So if you want to like put the pessimistic spin on this, it's that things can change like that. And we can be looking at this team and thinking, but if everything stays together and you're able to get all these guys, you can really envision a world where like all the pieces fit perfectly and hopefully everybody stays healthy. And like you said, there's not another push with Omicron or another COVID variant. But to answer all these questions, I don't know what they do. And I think that's a good thing. And I think that's
I want angry Clay on the bottom corner of the screen next week. Then I want half empty Clay. I want the smiling picture next week. So that worked for me, Clay.
Keep making fun of my internet. And that's how you'll get angry Clay.
Hey, you stayed on all 3 segments. I'm happy. Next
that's
Wednesday,
what I did.
I'll be home. No more hotel internet. No more drapes. We'll be good next week.
Guys, thank you. You've been great. Really added to the show today. We appreciate it. Heat taking on the Hawks tonight in Atlanta. We'll break it all down next week right here on Inside the
is the Big O Show.